Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bini'matillah, tumeamka kwa neema zake na uwezo wake na baraka zake. Alhamdulillah, tunamshukuru Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Leo ni siku ya Alhamis, tarehe ni 16 mwezi wa Shaaban mwaka 1447, ikiwa ni sawia na tarehe 5 Februari mwaka 2026. Kila unapoiona siku nyingine, mshukuru Mwenyezi Mungu, kwa sababu kuna wengine hawajaiona siku hii ya leo. Wewe umeneemeka wewe. Karibu sana. Mimi naitwa Nur Said. Katika dini na maadili mengi tutakuwa tunayazungumzia katika mambo, katika haswatan mwezi huu wetu wa Shaaban tulioko ndani yake, ambapo Mtume sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam katika hadithi ambazo zimethibiti ni kwamba alikuwa anafunga Shaabani yote ama anaifunga nusu. Sasa wewe utajipanga, je, utaifunga yote ama utakuwa unaifunga nusu? Lakini katika hadithi nyingine pia yasema alikuwa anafunga nusu ya mwanzo, anawacha nusu ya mwisho. Kwa sababu nyingi tu ambazo zimeweza kutajwa, tutakuwa tunazungumza kwa hayo. Lakini kama kawaida katika Sabah Al Khair kuna habari zetu za asubuhi, uchambuzi wa magazeti, spoti na mengine mengi ambayo tutakuwa tunakuandalia. Ni rasmi sasa, Arsenal itakuwa inakutana Manchester City katika kombe la Carabao Cup. Itakuwa ni marudio ya mechi ya mwaka 2017 ambapo Manchester City iliinyuka Arsenal mabao 3-0. Lakini bado hatujafikia spoti ba. Tuangazie habari za leo asubuhi. Mimi naitwa Nur Said. Chama cha Rais William Ruto UDA kinaendelea kupata umaarufu kote nchini kabla ya uchaguzi mkuu mwakani. Kulingana na naibu Rais Kithure Kindiki, UDA imesajili wagombea 12,353 kwa nafasi mbalimbali za uchaguzi. Kindiki alifichwa kwamba chama hicho kina wagombea 149 wa nafasi za ugavana, 279 kwa viti vya useneta, 323 kwa nafasi 47 za uwakilishi kina mama, na wagombea 1,372 wanaotaka viti vya ubunge. Idadi ya watu wanaotaka nafasi ya ubunge wa kaunti imefikia 10,230 dhidi ya wodi 1,450 zilizopo kote nchini. Katibu mkuu wa ODM Edwin Sifuna amejibu ripoti kwamba huenda akaondolewa kutoka katika nafasi hiyo yenye nguvu wakati wa mahojiano katika televisheni moja humu nchini. Sifuna alitangaza kwamba hana nia ya kuondoka chamani licha kutofautiana na maafisa wakuu wa chama hicho kuhusiana na uchaguzi wa mwaka 2027. Sifuna alisema atakuwa sawa ikiwa mkutano maalum wa kitaifa wa wajumbe NDC utaitishwa na atafukuzwa kutoka katika nafasi hiyo yenye nguvu bila heshima. Kulingana na Sifuna, kuna vijana wengi tu katika chama ambao wanaweza kufanya kazi bora kuliko yeye ikiwa watatajwa katika nafasi hiyo. Kimataifa, ripoti ya mwaka ya shirika la kutetea haki za kibinadamu The Human Rights Watch imetoa taswira ya kutisha inayopaka rangi ya damu, machozi na ukimya wa dunia. Ripoti hiyo ya dunia ya mwaka 2025 yenye kurasa 529 inaweka wazi ukweli mchungu. Raia wa kawaida ndio wamekuwa walengwa wakuu wa vita na siasa kandamizi, hususan katika pembe la Afrika na Afrika ya Mashariki. Kwa mujibu wa ripoti hiyo, kati ya zaidi ya nchi 100 zilizochunguzwa duniani, Sudan Kusini na Ethiopia zimetajwa kuwa miongoni mwa maeneo mabaya zaidi kwa raia. Katika nchi hizo, makosa ya kivita, mauaji ya kiholela na mashambulizi dhidi ya wakimbizi yameendelea kufanyika bila wahusika kuwajibishwa kwa vyovyote vile. Na michezoni, winga wa Arsenal Eberechi Eze amesema ni ndoto yake kushinda mataji na Arsenal, akiwa tayari anawazia fainali itakayogaragazwa katika uga wa Wembley baada ya The Gunners kufuzu fainali ya Carabao Cup. Nguvu mpya Kai Havertz alifunga bao dakika za jioni na kuisaidia Arsenal kutia kapuni ushindi wa 1-0 katika mechi ya mkondo wa pili ugani Emirates. Arsenal ilishinda mechi ya mkondo wa kwanza 3-2 na kufuzu fainali kwa jumla ya mabao 4-2. Fainali hiyo itagaragazwa mnamo Machi tarehe 22 katika uwanja wa kihistoria wa Wembley. Na katika mechi zilizopigwa hapo jana, ilikuwa ni mechi ya pili nusu fainali ya Carabao Cup kati ya Manchester City na timu ya Newcastle, ambapo timu ya Manchester City iliibuka mshindi kwa mabao 3-1 na kupelekea matokeo hayo kuwa mabao 5-1 katika mikondo yote miwili, ya kwanza na ya pili. Mabao ya Manchester City yalifungwa na Tijani Reinders dakika ya 32 na Umar Marmush akafunga mawili dakika 29 na dakika ya 7. Anthony Elanga aliwafuta machozi Newcastle United kwa mechi hiyo kumalizikia mabao 3-1. Katika Copa del Rey, timu ya Real Sociedad iliifunga timu ya Deportivo Alaves mabao 3-2. Mabao yake Oscarson, Guedes na Oyarzabal yaliwezesha Sociedad kuishinda Alaves. Mabao ya Martinez na Rebash hayakutosha kuipelekea Alaves kushinda. Katika mechi nyingine, timu ya Valencia ilishindwa na Athletic Club Bilbao. Iñaki Williams na Umar Sadiq walifungia timu zao za Athletic Club na vile timu ya Valencia. Katika mechi za humu nchini, timu ya Nai Boys almaarufu Nairobi United nayo pia iliweza kuuma meno baada ya kufungwa mabao 2-1 na timu ya APS Bomet katika mechi iliyochezwa jana jioni katika uwanja wa Nyayo. Na wikendi hii pia kutakuwa na mechi, ikiwemo mechi ya The Rising Starlets, Harambee Starlets, ambao watakuwa wanaipiga na timu ya Tanzania katika uwanja wa Ulinzi Sports Complex kuanzia saa 10. Mashabiki wanahusiwa kufika pale. Kiingilio ni shilingi 100 regular, shilingi 500 VIP. Na siku ya Jumapili, Nai Boys wanaendelea kuiwakilisha nchi katika michuano ya Confederations Cup, ambapo watakuwa wanacheza na Wydad Casablanca katika uwanja wa Nyayo. Pia mashabiki wanaomba kufika ili kuweza kuishabikia timu ya Nairobi United. Tunaingia katika magazeti, sende mbali. There is so much that we want to look at on our daily papers, and definitely we're going to start with the Daily Nation. And the lead story here is queries on Tycoon's State House visit. Now, opposition leaders link the man to supply of suspect poll kits in Africa. Now, on January 11th, controversial Zimbabwean Wicknell Chivayo flew to Sagana State Lodge to meet President William Ruto and his deputy Kithure Kindiki. He was the latest of many visits to Kenyan corridors of power by the flamboyant businessman, notorious in his country for a previous money laundering conviction. Chivayo's dalliance with Kenya's top leadership has raised eyebrows. Why are they visiting the president? And it is a high status visit, not just a normal visit. Now, that story is on the inside pages. Let's dive into it a little bit and understand what is really happening. Now, sources say the Smartmatic tender has cost JIRAs or the commission amid reports that the contract set to expire in November has been extended controversially. During the church service in Mathioya, Mr. Muturi wondered, that is Justin Muturi, wondered why Mr. Chivayo, the Zimbabwean, continued to enjoy access to President Ruto and his people, despite being linked to election-related controversies in several countries. Now, whenever he comes to Kenya, he passes through the Eldoret International Airport. We must begin to ask what President Ruto is doing with this man, that is Mr. Muturi. The Eldoret Gateway, just a few kilometers from President Ruto's Sugoi home in Uasin Gishu. Mr. Muturi also displayed photos which he claimed illustrated Mr. Chivayo inside the president's office and in meetings with regional leaders. According to the former Attorney General, the businessman political connection showed him from accountability. Now, is it all about a business connection, or it has anything to do with elections? Now, these are questions that need to be answered, especially when we are just under a year or over a year and some months to the next general elections in 2027. Now, students avoid arts and languages in senior schools. Now, this is also another story that is very interesting. Now, some public secondary schools are struggling after enrolling just 2 or 3 learners in languages and creative arts subjects at senior school. The low numbers highlight early cracks in the rollout of the competency-based curriculum system. Sources within the Ministry of Education say the original student placement system was designed to maintain balance among learners from different regions and backgrounds. However, recent changes appear to have disrupted this balance, leaving some schools with disproportionately small or skewed class compositions. Now, the ministry data shows that 51% of students are enrolled in STEM subjects, 38% in social sciences, and only 11% in arts and sports. Now, let me bring this into perspective so that we understand one another, especially parents that are still confused on what their children are supposed to do. Now, CBC has got pathways in Kenya whereby your child will follow this pathway whenever they want to continue from grade 9 to grade 10, right? Now, the pathways are 3. We have STEM. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, meaning that if your child wants to pursue sciences, if your child wants to pursue technology, any engineering courses or mathematics, then they must go through the STEM pathway. Now, the STEM pathway, that is where you'll get doctors, engineers, and so many other courses that are technical, right? Now, you find in our country, majority of the kids are placed into STEM, even those that their numbers or their marks could not match the STEM pathway. So it becomes congested there, okay? It becomes congested. Now, allowing students to specialize or rather to specialize based on their talents, interests, and future goals with core subject pathways is always a critical part of your child's career. You need to understand your child. Immediately they start school, you need to understand your child. Where are their strengths in the subjects that they are doing? Are they really good in mathematics, or you're just forcing them to do mathematics? Because when they go to grade 10, there is normal mathematics, simple mathematics, and then there is core mathematics. And if they're not good in mathematics, then you're just torturing this kid. All right. So many parents believe for their children to have a brighter future, then they must go through the STEM pathway. No, that is not the right call. If you believe that your child has another talent, they are good in languages, they can become journalists like us, they can become teachers, they can become whatever, you need to advise them so that they can go to the second pathway in the country, which is the social sciences. Now, the STEM pathway has tracks including pure sciences, applied sciences, technology and engineering, career and other technical studies. And the subjects, major subjects that they are going to base here is biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, computer science, and engineering. Now, the second pathway is social sciences pathway. Now, this mostly is for future leaders, communicators, and policy makers. All right. Here you'll find there is languages, literature, history, and other humanity subjects, especially religious subjects. They're all under the social sciences. Now, some of the tracks are humanities, business studies, languages, and literature. Some of the subjects that are undertaken here include history, geography, economy, Kiswahili, English, IRE, CRE, HRE, and other religious subjects. So all this falls under the social sciences. Now, when you insist that a child takes the STEM pathway, and maybe your child wants to become a teacher, then that is a wrong pathway that a child has taken. When they want to become teachers, when they want to become educators, when they want to become journalists, lawyers, and so many other subjects, they're supposed to take the second pathway, and that is the social sciences pathway. Now, the third pathway, and this is now where the problem lies in our country, is the arts and sports science pathway. We are told so many children are running away from this pathway. And if you look at the statistics, the numbers here, 51% of students are enrolled in STEM, meaning that the other 49 are left to scramble for positions in social sciences and arts and sports. Now, in social sciences, 38% have been enrolled. Only 11% are left for arts and sports science pathway. Now, when you talk about arts and sports science pathway, and here we talk about sportsmen, people that want to continue their career in sports, in athletics, in visual arts, performing arts, when they were basically, here we are talking about talent of this child. What is this child talented in? And of course, here he can take it as a career or as an added advantage of the subjects that he is taking under any pathway that he has been called upon. Now, subjects here include music, drama, physical education, that is PE, and various other sports discipline, including art and design. So these are the three pathways that your child is likely to encounter when they get to grade 10. And from there now, they are going to specialize on which pathways they are going to follow. So don't confuse your child. If you find that a child is good in the arts and sports, kindly support that child to pursue that pathway, because we have learned in so many schools there is low enrollment in arts, in languages, in sports, and these have really raised concern about the dedication of parents that they have to their children, especially when advising them on matters career and of course their future life. Now, subject selection, students choose 4 core subjects when they get to grade 10, that is English, Kiswahili, Kenyan Sign Language, Community Service Learning, and PE, and 3 elective from their chosen pathway. Now, from your chosen pathway, that is when you're going to choose the other 3. So if you're a scientist, you're going to choose maybe chemistry, physics, biology. Those are the subjects that you are choosing concerning the career focus that you're going to focus on. So those are the pathways that parents need to understand, especially when they are advising their kids on what they want to do. And again, we have also seen that the system does not favor other pathways more than STEM, because you'll find that close to all the schools are offering STEM, but so very many schools are not offering arts and sports. Of course, it needs a bit of a bigger infrastructure for that to happen, but again, we need to strive. We need to make sure that the children get the best in their education. So we just wait and see what is going to happen in the near future concerning CBE. I'm very sure even now they are looking at ways of improving how they are going to, how the children that are going to sit for the second national examinations are going to fare on, and how the distribution to schools is going to happen. Maybe there is something that is going to change. Now, Marjan's sudden exit with the 2027 elections looming leaves IEBC at crossroads. That is on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Now, Mr. Hussein Marjan's abrupt exit from the helm of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has exposed the perilous yet lucrative nature of a position that is fast becoming a revolving door. His controversial tenure as a chief executive officer has once again put the commission under intense scrutiny. It's called termination by mutual consent, whereby you agree with the government, I'm leaving, my contract is remaining 6 months or 7 or 8 months, you're going to pay me that, you're going to pay me maybe whatever, and then that is how you live. Family life, that is how you live. All right. So this has really acted in some people's mind, thinking that if I become a CEO of IBC, that is how I'm just going to live. The same as the chairman. These are positions that are very tricky in our country. But again, we wish Hussein Marjan all the best, inshallah, in his future endeavors. And so many people have started speculating on where he's going. Actually, you can't speculate. Whatever happens will happen. Now, House team gives nod to 204 billion Safaricom sale. The National Assembly's Finance and National Planning Committee says only 29.8 billion will be available for development expenditure in the 2025-26 financial year, underscoring the urgent need for divestiture of state-owned enterprises to ease pressure on public finances. The committee, chaired by Molo Member of Parliament Kuria Kimani, noted that out of projected ordinary revenue of 3.3 trillion, 1.1 trillion will go towards interest payments on the country's ballooning debt, while 960 billion will be sent on the public spent on the public wage bill. Again, matters spending in the country, and of course we can't delve deep into that because we are not professionals to devolve that and make it understandable. Now, 2027 realignments, bigwigs in Mount Kenya shun UDA ticket, and this was one of the major stories here. Now, the registration of aspirants for the 2027 general election by the ruling UDA has exposed dwindling fortunes in Mount Kenya. Data by UDA show that bigwigs in the mountain are shunning the party that swept President William Ruto and most of the lawmakers there to power in 2022. In some counties, the governor's seat did not attract a single aspirant to face the incumbent elected on a UDA ticket. Now, the party, however, remains strong in Rift Valley based on the number of registered aspirants. It is also seeking to make inroads in Western, Coast and Nyanza. More politicians from ODM bastions have registered to run on UDA compared to those who sought the ticket in the 2022 general election. Deputy President Kithure Kindiki said it is not a must for elected members to register as aspirants, adding that UDA still has a window to attract more aspirants in the when the general elections approach. Now, Baringo has 16 UDA governor aspirants, 6 for senators, 30 for women representatives, 84 for National Assembly positions, and 479 for member of the county assembly hopefuls, while Elgeyo Marakwet has registered 10 for governor, 15 for senate, 10 for women rep, 43 for National Assembly seats, and 278 for MCA. 13 people want to be governor on UDA ticket in Kericho County, 11 for Senate, 17 for women reps, 71 for the National Assembly, while 478 hope to be ward representatives. Now, those are the numbers that UDA are boasting. In Muranga, the Senate position has attracted 5 hopefuls, women representatives 3, National Assembly 1, 11, and 276 for MCA. Nakuru Governor Susan Kihika, Hillary Kipngeno, and Joseph Rotich will face fight for the UDA ticket, while the Senate seat has attracted 13 aspirants, women reps 12, National Assembly 77, and MCA 586. Tharaka Nithi MP George Murugara and his Maara colleague Kareke Mbioki will face off for the party ticket in their bid to succeed Tharaka Nithi Governor Muthomi Njuki. I think nominations will be incredible when the time comes before we get into the main elections, because political parties are realigning. Even in the DCP just yesterday, former LSK chairman Nelson Harvey also ditched UDA and crossed over to DCP. The same as Kanini Kega. He ditched Jubilee and went to the UDA party. So the parties have started realigning themselves, ready for the upcoming election that is on 2027. And of course, we are yet to see more realignments. This is just tip of the iceberg and nothing has happened so far. Now, getting into the inside pages of this paper, and we get into the opinions and speed up hiring of new IEBC chief ahead of poll. Speed up, who is going to take that hot seat? Because indeed that seat is very hot, very, very hot. Now, on the county news, counties blamed for high wages and poor development, and this story is interesting here. And of course, so many counties, and I was talking to Shaban yesterday and telling him that devolution was a blessing, but a blessing in disguise, because so many of the leaders who have been elected do not understand the meaning of devolution. They are not doing it right. They are not using the allocated funds to help the people in their community. Majority of the funds that are allocated for development are being diverted somewhere, and it becomes a very big problem. So that is why counties are being blamed for high wages. You're going for, I don't know, you're going somewhere to fight, I don't know, so many things are happening. Some of these travels that majority of the leaders go to, they spend a lot of money there. Now, on the international scene, Iran and the US to hold nuclear talks in Oman. The United States and Iran are to hold talks in Oman on Friday after Tehran requested a change of venue to limit negotiations to its nuclear program. With the buildup of US forces in the Middle East raising fears of a confrontation, Iran wanted the meeting to take place in Oman as a continuation of past rounds of talks held in the Gulf Arab country on its nuclear program, asking for a change of location from Turkey to avoid any expansion of the discussions to issue such a Tehran ballistic missile, a regional official has said. Now, it's ping pong in, or Iran and the US, this one saying this, the other one saying that, I will attack you, we'll hold talks. Iran has said it will not make concessions on its ballistic missile program, one of the biggest in the Middle East, calling that a red line in negotiations. Tehran, it says it replenished its stockpile of ballistic missiles since coming under attack from Israel last year, says it will unleash missiles to defend itself if threatened. Now, UN says Sudan and South Sudan violence forcing thousands to flee. Hostilities in Sudan and South Sudan have displaced hundreds of thousands of people. UN agencies said on Tuesday insecurity in many regions is pushing more people to flee and deepening an already severe humanitarian situation. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said in Sudan's South Kordofan state, a UN mission to Abu Jubeiha last week found more than 10,000 displaced people in camps facing hunger, ill health, and water shortage. May Allah protect them. Definitely they are going through a lot. Gaddafi's son died in noon attack. Saiful Islam Gaddafi, the son of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, was killed in an attack in the west of the country on Tuesday, according to his political team. Abdullahi Othman Abdurrahim, a member of the team, posted the announcement of Facebook saying 4 masked gunmen carried out a treacherous operation on Gaddafi's house in Zintan at noon. The raiders reportedly disabled surveillance cameras before a direct armed confrontation ensued. The team urged the Libyan courts and the global community to investigate and identify those who carried out the attack. Saiful Islam Gaddafi has remained a polarized figure since the 2011 NATO-backed uprising that ended his father's rule. Now, before we move on to sports, I think this is one of the last children of Muammar Gaddafi, rahimahullah, that are dying or are being killed. The whole of Libya, after the death of Muammar Gaddafi, his children were not left at peace. About 4 or 5 of them have been killed. Saiful Islam is maybe the 6th, and only one is remaining alive at the moment. But what pushes somebody or someone to kill a father and all his children, to wipe them out of the face of the world? What pushes this hatred? What pushes this bad blood? I think there was more than what we know, because Saiful Islam maybe became a threat to those people that are suppressing democracy in Libya, and the only way is to eliminate him so that he's not on the way. Allahu Akbar. This is not very right. Now, business, footwear imports up 63% on high cost in Kenya. Footwear imports in Kenya grew by 63.4% to 18.99 million pairs in the first 9 months of 2025, buoyed by high production costs and stringent trade policies in the domestic market. Data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics shows that in the 9 months to September, Kenyans imported 18.99 million shoes, up from 11.62 million in the previous year. Now, let's finish it up with sports news on the Daily Nation. Just one story before we move to Gazeti la Taifa Leo. And Rising Starlets vow to down Tanzania. Head coach Jacqueline Joma yesterday announced that Kenya's Rising Starlets are ready to face their Tanzanian rivals in the 2-legged third round of the 2026 Under-20 Women's World Cup qualifiers. The first match will take place on Saturday at 3 p.m. at the Ulinzi Sports Complex in Nairobi, with the second match taking place 7 days later at the Azam Sports Complex in Chamazi, Dar es Salaam. With the Kenyans aiming for victories, the team with the higher aggregate score will advance to the 4th and final round, where they will play the winner of the match between Cameroon and Botswana. Now, let's take a short break. When we are back, we'll now shift into Kiswahili katika gazeti la Taifa Leo. Tuko pamoja, usende mbali.
Hili ni bonge la surprise kwako. Ifikapo Alhamisi hivi upate kitu ambacho kitakukurubisha kwa Mola wako na bado kikupatie burdan ndani ya Al-Huda TV. Alhamisi kuanzia saa 10:30 hadi saa 11:30. Na maanisha nini? dakika 60. Nitakuwa na wewe ili tuweze kubadilishana fikra. Nikikupatia fursa kunipigia simu, je, utakuwa miongoni mwa wale ambao watapiga simu kutuma salamu kwa wale wawapendao, ama kwa wale ambao watashiriki katika chemsha bongo yangu? Usikose jamani, hii ni babu kubwa, hii ni zaidi ya show, hii ni Nashida kila siku ya Alhamisi na Shaban Yusuf.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our very first season of Inside Mental Wellness. Talking about mental health and wellness has become essential in our society today. With the rise of stress, social pressure, and economic challenges, open discussion about mental health can reduce stigma and misconception that prevent many individuals from seeking the help that they need. What do you know about mental wellness? And can you recognize when you or someone you love having a breakdown? What can we do to promote early intervention, strengthen social support system, enhance overall productivity and well-being? Join me, Zainab Abdullahi, on Inside Mental Wellness as we start a conversation to provide you with the answers on important challenges and first steps to take as we strengthen our mental well-being.
Kuna wale ambao kwamba walimuita mtoto wa nje ya ndoa, na kuna wengine walimpandisha daraja wakamuita ni mtoto wa Mola Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, na kuna wale ambao kwamba walimfanya ni part of the Trinity, ni moja kati ya Mungu watatu, na kuna wale ambao kwamba walimuita ndio Mungu mwenyewe. Kisha kuna watu wakatokea umma wakati na kati, al-wasatia, ambao kwamba wao walidai na kumuita kwamba yeye ni mtume wa Mola Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Ndugu mtazamaji, naomba uwe na mimi katika msimu huu wa Ramadhani itakapokuwa tunamzungumza ama tuizungumza maisha ya Nabii Isa alayhi wa ala nabiyina salam kulingana na mtazamo wa Uislamu. Vipi Uislamu imemueleza Nabii Isa alayhi salam, na vipi Nabii Isa alijieleza yeye mwenyewe, na vipi Qur'ani ilimueleza Nabii Isa alayhi wa ala nabiyina salam, na vipi ahadithi za Mtume sallallahu alaihi wasallam za mueleza Nabii Isa alayhi wa ala nabiyina salam. Inshallah katika msimu huu wa Ramadhani usikose kuangalia runinga yako na uienzi ya Al-Huda, upate uhondo na upate historia ya kumfahamu Nabii Isa alayhi wa ala nabiyina salam kama namna alivyokuwa mwenyewe Nabii Isa. Usikose kuandamana nami Hussein Al-Mudi katika silsila ya maisha ya Nabii Isa alayhi wa ala nabiyina salam kulingana na mtazamo wa Uislamu.
Taifa Leo na vigogo mlimani wa hepa UDA. Hili ni swala hili ambalo linafaa kuangaliwa kwa kina. Yasemekana zoezi la kusajili wawaniaji katika uchaguzi wa mwaka 2027 linaloendelea la chama tawala cha UDA limeonyesha kuporomoka kwa mvuto wa chama hicho katika eneo lenye idadi kubwa ya wapiga kura la Mlima Kenya. Takwimu za chama zaonyesha kuwa vigogo wa siasa katika eneo hilo wanaonekana kukiepuka chama hicho kilichomwezesha Rais William Ruto kuingia madarakani 2022. Katika baadhi ya kaunti, kiti cha ugavana hakikuvutia hata mwaniaji mmoja wa kung'ang'ana na gavana aliyoko madarakani kwa tiketi ya UDA. Hata hivyo, UDA bado ina nguvu katika eneo la Bonde la Ufa, ni kulingana na idadi ya waniaji waliojitokeza kujisajili, huko chama hicho kikijaribu sana kupenya katika maeneo ya magharibi, pwani na vile vile Nyanza. Swali ni je, kwa nini UDA haijavutia wawaniaji wengi katika sehemu ya mlimani? Yamaanisha kwamba umaarufu wa chama hichi unayooma unadidimia? Swala hili kwa wadadisi wa siasa waweze kutufafanulia. Maswali kuhusu ziara ya mgeni mwenye utata kimaadili katika Ikulu mnamo Januari 11, mfanyibiashara machachari kutoka Zimbabwe Wicknell Chivayo, anayejulikana pia kama Sir Wicknell, alisafiri kwa ndege hadi ikulu ndogo ya Sagana alipokutana na Rais William Ruto pamoja na naibu wake Kithure Kindiki. Mfanyibiashara huyo anajulikana sana nchini mwake kutokana na hukumu ya awali ya ulanguzi wa fedha. Baadaye alichapisha picha katika mitandao ya kijamii akiwapongeza viongozi hao wawili. Hasa ikiwa ni mtu anayojulikana kwamba maadili yake si sawa, amepatikana na matatizo hapa na pale katika nchi yake, vipi anakaribishwa tena kwa makaribisho ya kipekee katika nchi ya Kenya? Kuna nini kinajificha hapo ndani? Ndio swala ambalo Wakenya wengi wanajiuliza. Sasa jaji akataa marasta kuwasilisha mbegu za bangi kama ushahidi. Jaji wa mahakama kuu ya Milimani Nairobi jana alikataa ombi la wanachama wa jamii ya Rastafarian waliotaka kupewa fursa kuwasilisha kama shahidi mbegu za bangi katika kesi wanayotaka waruhusiwe kutumia mihadarati hiyo wakati wa ibada zao. Siwezi kuvunja sheria kwa kuruhusu kuingizwa mahakamani dawa ambayo imeharamishwa kisheria, alisema jaji. Jaji mzuri huyo. Jaji mzuri huyo. Na tumetaja baadhi ya masomo ambayo yanakosa gredi, baadhi ya masomo ambayo yanakosa wanafunzi wa gredi ya 10. Wengi walioingia katika gredi ya 10, kuna masomo ambayo wanaikwepa. Wengi wao wanaelekea katika masomo ambayo pengine hata hawakuchaguliwa kuwa katika masomo kama yale. Baadhi ya shule za upili za umma zimejipata matatani baada ya kusajili wanafunzi 2 au 3 peke yake katika masomo ya lugha na sanaa bunifu katika shule za sekondari pevu. Hali inaashiria visiki vya mapema katika utekelezaji wa mfumo wa elimu unaozingatia umilisi, yani CBE. Kwa mujibu wa duru kutoka Wizara ya Elimu, mfumo wa awali uliopangwa kudumisha uwiano wa wanafunzi kutoka maeneo na asili mbalimbali. Hata hivyo, mabadiliko ya hivi karibuni katika mchakato wa uteuzi yamevuruga uwiano huo na kusababisha walimu kubaki na madarasa yenye idadi ndogo au mpangilio usio sawa wa wanafunzi. Takwimu za Wizara ya Elimu zinaonyesha kuwa 51% ya wanafunzi wamejisajili katika masomo ya STEM. Right, tuingie ndani. Kiti moto cha IEBC, mrithi wa Marjan atarajie jinamizi. Kuondoka kwa afisa mkuu mtendaji wa tume ya IEBC Hussein Marjan kulikotajwa kama makubaliano ya pande zote kumezua maswali mengi, hasa ikizingatiwa kuwa amekuwa watatu kuondoka katika wadhifa huo ambao sasa unaonekana kuwa kazi moto sana. Hatua hiyo imejiri chini ya miaka 2 kabla ya uchaguzi mkuu mwakani, jambo linalomaanisha kuwa uamuzi wa kumtema akiwa afisa aliyesalia kati ya wakuu wa tume hiyo waliosimamia uchaguzi tata wa 2022 utaendelea kupigwa darubini. Huyo ni bwana Hussein Marjan, moja katika wakuu katika IEBC. Pendekezo wabakaji wahasiwe lazua mjadala mkali nchini. Pendekezo la jopo kazi kuhusu dhulma za kijinsia GBV la kuanzisha adhabu ya kuhasiwa kwa kemikali kwa wahalifu wa makosa ya kingono wanaopatikana na hatia limezua mjadala mpana nchini, huku wataalamu wa afya, wanasheria na wanaharakati wa haki za kibinadamu wakitoa maoni yanayokinzana kuhusu athari na uhalali wa hatua hiyo. Jopo kazi hilo linaloongozwa na aliyekuwa naibu jaji mkuu Nancy Baraza limependekeza marekebisho ya sheria ya makosa ya kingono mwaka 2006 ili kujumuisha adhabu ya kuhasi kwa kemikali wanaume na wanawake wanaopatikana na hatia ya kuwadhulumu watoto na watu wenye ulemavu. Ingawa pendekezo hilo limewasilishwa kama suluhu kali ya kukabiliana na ongezeko la visa vya dhulma za kijinsia na kingono, wataalamu wanaonya kuwa linaweza kuwa na madhara ya kiafya, kimaadili na kisheria ya muda mrefu. Haya, tunazidi kusonga ndani tu. Omari na Mbogo pamoja na Samboja kupigania tiketi ya UDA. Habari za pwani hizi, wa pwani mpo? Basi aliyekuwa mbunge wa Kisauni Ali Mbogo atashindania tiketi ya chama cha UDA dhidi ya aliyekuwa seneta Hassan Omar kuwania ugavana Mombasa mwaka 2027. Wawili hao ni miongoni mwa wanasiasa zaidi ya 12,000 wanaopanga kushindania tiketi hiyo kuwania wadhifa mbalimbali katika uchaguzi mkuu ujao. Hii itakuwa mara ya 3 kwa Omar ambaye ndiye katibu mkuu wa UDA kuwania ugavana Mombasa. Aliwania kwa mara ya kwanza mwaka 2017 kwa chama cha Wiper, kisha baadaye 2022 kupitia UDA bila kufaulu. Kwa upande mwingine, Mbogo alipewa tiketi ya kuwania ugavana wa chama cha Wiper mwaka 2022, lakini uamuzi huo ukabadilika baadaye ilipoamuliwa awe mgombea mwenza wa aliyekuwa gavana wa Nairobi Mike Sonko. Siasa na wanasiasa. Mwanawe Gaddafi auawa Libya. Katika habari za kimataifa, Saiful Islam Gaddafi, mwana wa kiongozi wa zamani wa Libya Kanali Muammar Gaddafi, ameripotiwa kupigwa risasi na kuuawa. Kifo cha mwanasiasa huyo mwenye umri wa miaka 53 ambaye hapo awali alionekana kuwa mrithi wa babake kilithibitishwa na mkuu wa timu yake ya kisiasa, kulingana na shirika la habari la Libya. Watoto wa Gaddafi wamemalizwa kwelikweli. Hii inakuwa ni balaa. Na tukimalizia mtazamaji, tuangazie habari za lugha na fasihi. Kauli ya Wala bin Wala leo ni bidii yako kazini ndio itakufaa maishani, usifanye kosa la kutegemea bahati. Muhimu hiyo uitie kwenye ratili na uitie kwenye mizani. Rising Starlets sasa ngangari kukabiliana na Tanzania. Hizi ni under 20 wakiwania kufuzu kombe la dunia. Kenya itamenyana na Tanzania siku ya Jumamosi kuanzia saa 9 katika uga wa Ulinzi Sports Complex. Kiingilio ni 100 na 500, usikose kufika kama sijakosea. APS Bomet ya hepa hatari kwa kulima Nairobi United mabao 2-1, nayo Homeboys ya fieka maafisa wa kiufundi. Na tukimalizia, Arsenal imani tele baada ya kutinga fainali ya Carabao Cup. Je, watawezana na Manchester City? Swali hilo. Mwezi wa Shaaban, mtazamaji, ni mwezi wa kulipa madeni kwa wale ambao wana madeni katika mwezi mtukufu wa Ramadhani. Ni mwezi wa kuzidisha ibada ili Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala atufikishe mwezi mtukufu wa Ramadhani, na ni mwezi wa kujitayarisha kwa ajili ya mgeni mwema tunaomtegemea mwezi wa Ramadhani. Marhaban ya shahra Ramadan, marhaban shahra siyami, marhaban ya shahra Ramadan, marhaban shahra saada wal Qur'ani. Tumuombe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala atufikishe mwezi wa Ramadhani. Kwa niaba ya wote waliofanikisha Sabah Al Khair, Jamii na Maadili siku hii ya leo, mimi naitwa Nur Said. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The date is 16th Shaban 1447 on the Islamic calendar, corresponding to 5th February 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. And you are watching Muslim World News with me, your host, Abdurrahman Muhammad. Let's dive in headfirst and take a look at today's headlines. On our first story, ultimatum over rogue police. Following up, leaders demand IEBC reforms. And on our business story, Turkana oil plant sets to consume 34 megawatts power. And on sports, London Marathon, elite clash looms. Now on our first story right here in Kenya, Kenya's united opposition has given the Inspector General of Police a 2-week ultimatum to arrest officers allegedly involved in the Othaya church attack, accusing parts of the force of acting as rogue elements and warning of mass action if the deadline isn't met by 16th February 2026. Leaders from Wiper, DCP and allied parties said the January attack in which former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua's convoy was targeted was not a normal incident and that officers armed with military-style weapons were deployed. They insist the IG must act quickly to arrest suspects or face broader political fallout. Critics of police conduct, including Jubilee's Fred Matiang'i, has backed calls for the force to uphold the rule of law and respect constitutional rights, while political leaders Martha Karua urged President Ruto to end the intimidation of opposition members by security agents. We were very clear, if they have not arrested the police officers with AK-47s, we shall call for mass action, said Kalonzo Musyoka, emphasizing the urgency of accountability and underpinning political tension over police conduct. The ultimatum highlights deep mistrust in parts of Kenya's security service and growing political pressure for police accountability, even as authorities reaffirm the need for law enforcement to operate within constitutional bounds. How the IG responds by mid-February could shape Kenya's political landscape and public confidence in security institutions going into future elections. On our next story, Kenyan political leaders from the united opposition have presented a firm list of demands to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commissioner, IEBC, seeking urgent reforms to ensure the electoral body is ready to deliver free, fair and credible polls ahead of the 2027 general elections. The coalition highlighted shortcomings seen during recent by-elections, including violence, lack of security and organizational lapses, and wants the IEBC to fix structural weaknesses, improve planning and strengthen election security before the national polls. Leaders also call for transparency in electoral technology, replacement of compromised officials and reforms in how results are tallied and announced, including changes to make polling stations final tallying centers amid broader concern over the Commission's independence. We have asked them to address the issues of hooliganism and security witnessed in the last by-elections, opposition leaders said, emphasizing the urgency to reform to protect electoral integrity, with confidence in the IEBC warning among voters and observers calling for urgent reforms. How the Commission responds to these demands could shape public trust and the credibility of Kenya's electoral process as the country gears up for its next pivotal election. Uasin Gishu County has announced plans to invest over 200 million in expanding its vocational training centers. The move comes in response to the increasing number of students expected to enroll. The county planned to invest more than 200 million shillings, which will fund 2 new centers in Karuma Meibeki and Simat Kapsaret, as well as renovations at Eldoret VTC and the newly built Ngenyilel VTC. Governor Jonathan B. highlights improvements at the county's vocational training centers, saying renovations at Eldoret VTC in Kipienyo has been completed at a cost of 1.3 million, while Ngeilel Vocational Training Center has been constructed at 100 million. These facilities will be commissioned soon. The governor reveals a collaboration with the KCB to Jiajiri program, where the county allocates 25 million shillings matched by KCB to total 50 million shillings in funding. He calls on VTC principals to spearhead outreach efforts and increase student enrollment, while stressing that these centers must move beyond basic training by creating innovative solutions to urban issues such as affordable housing and infrastructure upkeep. Each center is expected to develop key innovation projects, strengthen partnerships with industry, and participate in skill competition and exhibition. This needs to change, be as such, emphasizing the importance of full utilizing tools and equipment. He emphasizes the county's commitment to providing supportive policies, adequate resources, and an environment that enables VTCs to become engines of innovation, employment, and inclusive urban growth. He stresses that the county will continue providing the right policies, adequate resources, and supportive environments to make the VTCs catalysts for innovation, job creation, and inclusive development. Now let's take a look at a catastrophe that has been happening at Mandera County. Mandera County is enduring a severe drought that has crippled livestock, the main source of income for many families, pushing food insecurity and malnutrition to alarming levels. With water and pasture running low, herders are forced to sell weakened animals at low prices just to survive. Relief efforts are ongoing, but experts stress that long-term solutions are urgently needed. Speaking to reporters, Kenya Red Cross Coordination Mustafa Adan says as we speak about 67,000 households have been impacted. The drought has severely affected malnutrition status, with malnutrition cases rising due to lack of milk and loss of livelihoods. According to the National Drought Management Authority, the crisis affected over 2 million people across arid counties following 3 failed rainy seasons. While immediate relief continues, local leaders call on the government to invest in water storage and other long-term measures to help communities withstand future droughts. Our next story takes us onto the coast of Kenya. Mombasa authorities have confiscated large amounts of illegal alcohol stored dangerously close to a primary school, sparking concerns about the safety of children and the wider community. Mombasa authorities have confiscated large amounts of illegal alcohol that was stored dangerously close to a primary school. That sparked concerns about the safety of children and the wider community. The operation, led by the National Authority for the Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, NACADA, focused on the Kongowea area, resulting in the closure of multiple outlets and arrests of those involved in selling contraband products. NACADA's CEO urges we call on the public to report any sales of alcohol near schools through our toll-free line or at the nearest police station. Officials discovered 6 outlets owned by a single person distributing illicit alcohol, including bottles with counterfeit or mismatched Kenya Revenue Authority stamps, as well as products from companies whose licenses have been revoked. 4 individuals were arrested, and authorities also found unlicensed sales of single cigarettes and pharmaceutical products. This enforcement is part of a larger intelligence-driven effort to combat illegal alcohol and drug trade nationwide. NACADA emphasizes that selling alcohol close to schools endangers children and encourages the community to assist authorities by reporting suspicious activities to help prevent drug and alcohol abuse. Our next story, right here in Africa, Rwanda has escalated its dispute to the United Kingdom by filing a case at an international arbitration court, accusing London of failing to meet financial obligations after cancelling a controversial migrant relocation agreement. The legal move follows Britain's decision to abandon the asylum partnership shortly after a change of government, a decision Rwanda says left key commitments unresolved. Through arbitration, Rwanda is seeking a legal determination of the parties' respective rights and obligations under the treaty in accordance with international law, said Michael Butera, Chief Technical Advisor to Rwanda's Minister of Justice. The case now places the spotlight on a deal that proved politically divisive in the UK and raised wider questions about how migration agreements between Europe and Africa are enforced. The Asylum Partnership was signed under the former UK Conservative government as part of efforts to discourage irregular crossing of the English Channel. In exchange for relocating asylum seekers to Rwanda, Britain agreed to provide financial support for reception facilities and development projects. After Labour won the 2024 general election, Prime Minister Keir Starmer cancelled the scheme, describing it as costly and ineffective. The UK government later confirmed it would stop future payments estimated at more than £200 million, although nearly £300 million had already been paid. Rwanda argues that some treaty obligations survived the cancellation and says it's pursued diplomatic discussions before turning to arbitration. Under the agreement, both countries accepted that unresolved disputes could be referred to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, whose rulings can be legally binding. The court has listed the case as pending with no timeline yet announced. Any decision could take years and may have implications for future migration partnerships between African state and European governments. On our next story, Burkina Faso's military government has officially disbanded all political parties nearly 4 years after suspending them following a coup. Officials say the move is part of an effort to strengthen national unity and restore state institutions. This decision comes as the junta faces growing security challenges, including attacks by Islamists militants linked to the Al Qaeda and ISIL, while continuing to limit political freedom. The multiplication of political parties has fueled division and weakened social cohesion, said Interior Minister Emile Zerbo, explaining that all party assets will now be transferred to the state. Observers say the decree marks another step in the country's political restructuring, as Burkina Faso increasingly relies on Russian support for security and distances itself from its former colonial partners, France. Captain Ibrahim Traoré seized power in September 2022 following an earlier 2022 coup that removed President Roch Marc Kabore before the military takeover. Burkina Faso had more than 100 registered political parties, with 15 represented in parliament after the 2022 elections. In recent years, the junta has restricted media freedom, blocking websites and digital platforms of international outlets that has joined Mali and Niger in forming the alliance of Sahel states to boost regional cooperation. Our next story focuses on Asia, where health authorities are watching a Nipah virus outbreak in India's West Bengal state with global concern, even though it remains limited, because Nipah is a highly fatal zoonotic virus with no approved vaccine or cure and a historic of severe outbreaks. India reports 2 confirmed Nipah cases in January 2026, both healthcare workers in Barasat, and traced more than 190 contacts, all of whom tested negative. The outbreak was contained with surveillance, lab testing, and isolation, reducing wider transmission risk. Nipah can spread from animals like fruit bats to humans and occasionally between people through close contact, causing fever, brain inflammation, and respiratory symptoms. Past outbreaks have had fatal rates of 40% to 75%, making Nipah one of the more feared emerging viruses. The WHO considers the risk of further spread of infection from these 2 cases is low. A WHO official said, underlining that there are currently no signs of wider transmission, even as precautionary screening and surveillance continues in the region. While the situation remains localized and under control, the world's attention on the Nipah outbreak highlights how high fatality rare viruses with no vaccine demand swift response and strong public health measures, especially in regions where human-animal interactions can spark spillover events. Now, on our next story, Israeli airstrikes hit multiple areas of southern Lebanon in late January and early 2026, targeting rural villages and valley despite a ceasefire with Hezbollah that has been in place since November 2024, raising tension along the border. Fresh strikes were reported in the Zahrani district and surrounding areas, with explosions heard near Sidon and as warplanes hit several locations. The Israeli military says the targets are Hezbollah infrastructure sites, a claim rejected by Lebanon's authority as groundless and a breach of the truce. The Lebanese government filed a UN complaint saying it's documented thousands of ceasefire violations and demanding accountability, while Lebanon's health minister has reported deaths and injuries from past strikes, including attacks on civilian areas. These repeated violations of our sovereignty and the ceasefire agreement cannot go unanswered, Lebanese officials said in their complaint to the United Nations, expressing deep frustration over cross-border attacks. With tensions simmering and diplomatic efforts ongoing, the repeated strikes underscore how fragile the ceasefire has become and how easily localized violence could escalate into broader conflict as Lebanon and Israel navigate security concerns and regional pressure. Our next story takes us onto the West as the New START nuclear arms control treaty nears expiration on the 5th February 2026. The United States and Russia faces the prospect of an unregulated nuclear arms race for the first time since the Cold War, with no formal limits on deployed strategic weapons and mutual inspections. New START, signed in 2010, capped each side's deployed strategic warheads at 1,550 and delivery systems at 700, with verification measures that helped temper mistrust. Russia has suggested a year-long informal extension to keep those limits in place, but the US has yet to agree formally, leaving a treaty gap looming. Without a successor pact, analysts say Washington and Moscow could begin expanding their arsenals, potentially prompting China's growth force to further intensify competition and compel the US to modernize its nuclear capabilities, a process that would cost years and vast resources. If the US exceeds New START limits by uploading warheads, Russia will do the same. Ultimately, Trump will have started a new arms race that we do not need, nor can we win, said Senator Ed Markey, expressing concern that the treaty's lapse could spark destabilizing escalation, with arms control architecture frying and symbolic warnings like the doomsday clock creeping closer to midnight. The world watches closely as the US-Russia diplomacy enters a critical moment, one that may decide whether decades of restraint are replaced by a costly, dangerous arms race. From stories of real human lives and faces, let's take a look at numbers and statistics of business news. On our first story, the government is rolling out a major share sales of the Kenya Pipeline Company, aiming to attract up to 2 million investors in what could become one of the largest public offerings in the country's history. The initial public offering will see the state offload a significant stake in the energy transporter as part of efforts to raise capital and widen public ownership of key national assets. The offer is being conducted through the Nairobi Securities Exchange, with ordinary Kenyans encouraged to take part alongside institutional and foreign investors. Authorities say the structure of the offer is designed to make participation affordable, especially for first-time investors. Officials explain that the IPO is intended to deepen the capital markets, reduce reliance on public borrowing, and give citizens a chance to benefit directly from the performance of a strategic state corporation. The government plans to reach the ambitious target by lowering entry costs, allocating a large portion of shares to retail investors, and using digital platforms to simplify applications. If successful, the Kenyan Pipeline IPO would mark a major milestone in public participation in capital markets and signal renewed confidence in Kenya's investment landscape. On our next business story, Kenya's planned oil process facility in Turkana County is expected to use up to 34 megawatts of electricity once it reaches peak operations, highlighting the heavy energy demands of the county's emerging oil sector. Project developers say most of this power will be generated on site using gas-powered systems linked to oil production. However, the facility will also be connected to the national electricity grid to provide backup supply during peak demands or maintenance periods. The oil plant is located in the South Lokichar Basin, which commercial oil development is being prepared after years of exploration and pilot production. Power demands will start at lower levels during early operations and gradually rise as production increases. Energy analysts warn that drawing power from the grid, even occasionally, could place added pressure on Kenya's electricity supply, especially during high demand periods. Government officials say the project reflects the broader challenge of balancing industrial growth with reliable energy access. They note that investments in generation and transmission will be critical as Kenya moves closer to full-scale oil production. The Turkana oil project is seen as a major economic opportunity, but one that comes with significant infrastructure demands. And on our final business story, small-scale tea farmers have lost a court case challenging the 2024 to 2025 bonus payment system after a judge ruled that the dispute had already been overtaken by events. The farmers had gone to court claiming they were discriminated against after receiving lower bonus payouts compared to growers in other regions, despite selling their tea through the same auction system. They argued that the wide difference is bonus rates accounted to unfair treatment and violated constitutional principles of equality and fair administrative action. However, the court found that the contested bonus payment had already been fully paid out, making it impossible for the judiciary to issue effective remedies. In dismissing the case, the judge ruled that there was no longer a live dispute requiring court intervention, effectively shutting down the legal challenge. Tea sector regulators and agencies named in the case had maintained that bonus calculations and payments were completed lawfully and within existing frameworks. The ruling comes amid growing frustration among tea farmers over persistent disparities in earnings and issues that continue to fuel debates within Kenya's tea industry. While the case has been dismissed, farmer groups say concerns over transparency and fairness in bonus payments remain unresolved. From numbers and statistics of business news, now let's take a look at sports news. We're on our first story. The National Olympics Committee of Kenya, NOCK, has announced plans to rebuild a high-performance training center at the Kenyatta University, designed to give Kenyan athletes access to advanced sports science, technology, and elite coaching in preparation for major events, including the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Under the partnership, Kenyatta University will provide the space while NOCK develops and equips the facility. NOCK Secretary General John Ogolla said the push reflects a shift from relying on raw talent to structured science-based training and includes a program to train coaches in modern methods. The center will also house a database of coaches and technical officials for ongoing performance monitoring and will support athletes across disciplines as part of Kenya's broader strategy to strengthen competitive results. NOCK's first president, Barnaba Korir, described the initiative as part of a transformative agenda for Kenyan sports. With initiatives like this, I am optimistic that the number of women coaches will increase, said athletes representative Doreen Okidi, highlighting the center's potential impact on both performance and gender inclusion in coaching. The High Performance Center at Kenyatta University signals a new era in Kenya's elite sport development, blending scientific training, coaching excellence, and strategic planning with a focus on long-term success on global stage. And on our next story, nearly 280 golfers are set to tee off at the Royal Nairobi Golf Club on 31st January 2026, kicking off the NCBA Golf Series, a regional amateur golf circuit backed by 60 million shillings in sponsorship and spanning Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. The Royal leg is the first of 35 events in Kenya this year, including main qualifiers, mug and club nights, with competitors vying for sports and points that lead to the series grand finale on 27th November 2026 at Karen Country Club. NCBA has renewed partnerships with the Kenya Golf Union and the Junior Golf Foundation, underscoring a focus on talent pathways from junior to amateur levels and expanding competitive golf opportunities across East Africa. Our annual investment of over 60 million shillings is not just a statistic. It reflects lives touched, dreams ignited, and a legacy of excellence we are proud of nurturing, said NCBA Group Managing Director John Gajora, highlighting the impact of the bank's commitment to the sport. With a large field expected at the Royal Qualifiers and strong regional momentum behind the series, the 2026 NCBA Golf Series is shaping up as a key fixture in East African golf, offering competition, growth, and opportunity for players of all ages and skill levels. And on our final sports story, 2026 London Marathon on April 2026 looks set for a thrilling showdown as defending champion Sebastian Sawe returns to face a stellar elite field, including Jacob Kiplimo, Joshua Cheptegei, Tamira Tola, and more, in one of the deepest men's marathon lineups in recent memory. Sawe won last year's race in 2 hours, 2 minutes and 27 seconds, the second fastest time ever on the London course, and says that with the strength of competitors entered, a course record level performance may be needed to win again in 2026. The elite lineup also includes world champions and Olympics medalists, with Kiplimo coming off a Chicago Marathon win and Cheptegei bringing track global titles into the marathon mix. The women's race is likewise stacked, featuring Tigis Afesa, Sifan Hassan, and Perez Jepchirir, a trio capable of another record-breaking performance. I know now a little bit more about what I can expect. With the quality of athletes coming to London, it will take another fast time to win again. Perhaps the type of effort the great Kelvin Kiptum put in, said defending champion Sebastian Sawe, capturing the competitive expectation ahead of the big race. With one of the deepest fields ever seen and global attention on both elite and mass runners, including more than 1 million applicants worldwide. The 2026 London Marathon promises spectacle, speed, and potentially historic performances as the world's best battle for glory on the streets of British capital. Before we wrap up this week, here's something about how our minds measures happiness. Did you know humans tend to feel happier when they spend money on experiences rather than things? Memories of moments last longer and bring more satisfaction than material items. We are wired to value experiences more than possessions. Moments stay with us long after things fade, so if you're choosing between buying something or making a memory this week, your brain already knows which one it will treasure longer. If you didn't know, dear viewers, now you know. That brings us to the end of today's program of Muslim World News. I've been your host, Abdurrahman Muhammad, and it's been a pleasure having you with us. But as we've come to the end of our news bulletin today, we turn to this week's feature story. So stay informed, stay inspired, and may peace be upon you. Here's Shab.
In Kenya today, female genital mutilation exists in a strange manner. It is illegal, widely condemned, and yet still quietly practiced. It is a harm that does not announce itself in public spaces, but one that lives on in the bodies and memories of girls and women across the country. Despite years of activism and legal reform, FGM remains a powerful reminder of how deeply control over women's bodies can be embedded in society. Officially, Kenya has made progress. National data shows a steady decline in prevalence, with recent figures indicating that about 15% of women aged 15 to 49 have undergone FGM. Younger generations are less affected than their mothers and grandmothers, suggesting that advocacy, education, and the law are having a great impact. But numbers alone cannot tell the full story. Behind every percentage is a girl whose childhood was interrupted, whose consent was never sought, and whose pain was justified as tradition. FGM is often framed as a cultural practice, but its effects are profoundly personal. The immediate consequences can include severe pain, bleeding, and infection, while the long-term effects follow when women in adulthood complain about childbirth, chronic health issues, sexual dysfunction, and deep psychological trauma. For many survivors, the experience reshapes how they relate to their body, their partners, and motherhood itself. It is a wound that does not simply heal with time. Kenya's legal position on FGM is clear. The Prohibition of Female Genital Mutilation Act 2011 criminalized the practice in its all forms and created an anti-FGM board to coordinate prevention and public education. On paper, the law is strong. In practice, enforcement remains difficult. FGM is rarely reported by victims, who are often minors, dependent on family members, or afraid of consequences. As a result, the practice has adapted, moving underground, becoming more secretive, and harder to detect. What makes FGM particularly complex is that it is not sustained not by ignorance alone, but by pressure. Girls are told it's necessary for acceptance, respectability, or adulthood. Silence is rewarded, resistance punished. Even where awareness exists, fear of exclusion can be more powerful than fear of the law. In this way, FGM is not only a physical act, but a social one enforced through expectations and control. There is, however, resistance. Survivors are speaking out, activists are challenging long-held beliefs and alternative rites of passage, and redefining what it means to grow up as a girl without harm. Support from institutions such as UNICEF and UNFPA has strengthened community education, survivor support, but the most meaningful change has come from conversations at home, where mothers choose not to cut their daughters and girls learn that their bodies are not bargaining tools for social approval. FGM in Kenya today is no longer a question whether is it harmful. That debate has long been settled. The real question is whether society is willing to fully confront the power structures that allow it to persist. Ending FGM requires more than laws and statistics. It requires courage, accountability, and the collective decision that no tradition is worth a girl's pain. Until that decision is universal, FGM will remain a silent struggle in a country that otherwise prides itself on progress. Reporting for Al Huda TV, it is I, Adila Saif Salum.